How's going, guys? Welcome to the channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto reincarnated as Hagoromo and got Harem Natsumi Fem Sasuke, Part 1. Huge shout out to WouldItMatter for this story. If you wants to see awesome fanfiction like this, don't forget to subscribe. Now let's get into the video. A tiny liquid droplet met the blank face of a young child, staring up at the moonlit night sky. Since when was it raining? The child thought to himself, blankly staring up at the stars, his gaze traveling over the black expanse, dotted by numerous white dots. In the center was one massive white rock. The moon. It calls, does it not? The boy's mental voice, the voice that all people think to themselves with, it sounded tired. The boy's eyes locked onto the moon, and the boy felt his chest begin to clench in on itself slightly. The boy felt a connection with the moon. What it was, he could not say. But he knew it was there. Like he knew there was something dripping on his face. I do not see any clouds. The boy thought to himself, his eyes searching the expanse of sky, searching for clouds. Where is the rain coming from? The child wondered, inspecting the sky, hoping to find an answer to his question. His eyes met the moon again, and their gaze stiffened, locked with a white rock. The moon. Why does it call to me? The child questioned, his eyes staring at the moon. In the dead of night, silence permeating the area around the small child, power began to build. Unbeknownst to the boy, his pupil began to shrink down to a small dot. His sapphire eyes faded, losing color quickly. Then, methodically, his pupil pulsated, sending out ripples across his eye. The ripples slowly came to a stop, placing themselves in concentric circles that surrounded his now miniature pupil. Then, color exploded outward of his pupil, a soft, regal purple expanding across his sclera. Eventually, the changes in his eyes settled, and the boy felt no difference. Saw no change. Felt the same. Though, he came to realize something. How silly of me. That's not rain. The boy's eyes finally broke from the night sky, scanning the immediate area around him. He was in his house, his door broken down and laying on the ground. Why was there a hole in his ceiling? The boy then noticed that around him lay 3 dead bodies. It's blood. The boy thought to himself, confirming his findings by bringing his right hand up to his cheek, grazing his skin, before dragging his hand back down, staring at the crimson liquid that stained his fingertips. But why is there blood here? The boy asked himself, his new question prompting him to twist his back and look all around him. A tall man stood behind him, grinning insanely with a black knife glinting in the moonlight, blood dripping from the tip. Ah! That was how the blood was dripping onto him. But this posed a new question. What was he doing here? Who was he? The boy's lips parted slightly, his throat tensing in preparation to speak, before the words fell silent. The man was raising his knife, his grin somehow stretching as he did so. What is he doing? The boy questioned, his eyes following the knife as it raised, before its descent began. Shinra Tensei. A new voice, one the boy had not heard before, rang within his head. It was old, wise, calm. It made the boy feel peace. It made him feel safe. It was familiar. Why was it familiar? He swore he had never heard it before, but it felt like it was there, his entire life. Shinra Tensei. It repeated, and the boy found that he could formulate words once more, even as the knife neared his forehead. The boy's lips parted, muttering softly. Shinra Tensei. The words were soft, quiet, eerily calm. The boy's eyes watched as the knife hovered above his forehead for a precious second, the man's eyes widening in shock, before a thunderous boom met the boy's ears, forcing him to close his eyes. His hair whipped around his head, fluttering viciously in powerful winds, before eventually it settled, and the boy withdrew his hands from his eyes. Opening them slowly, the boy's eyes widened slightly upon seeing once more. A house surrounded him no longer. His walls were gone, not even debris surrounded him. The bodies, they were gone as well. Where had the man gone? The boy looked all around him, searching, but could not find the man. The houses to his left and right, where his neighbors resided, had chunks blown into them, pieces of his house embedded within their walls and roofs. When had those gotten there? Why was his house in pieces now? The boy raised his head, shaggy blonde hair falling onto his face and in his eyes, but he did not care. His eyes met the moon once more, and the boy found himself smiling. His house may be gone, but there was a plus side to this. He could see the moon easier. The boy felt at peace, sitting in the crater he once called his home, his shirt destroyed and in tatters around his body. The voice returned once more within his head. Sleep, child. The boy was tempted to say no, for he wanted to continue to watch the moon, before he felt weight pile onto his eyelids, and he could no longer hold them up, the lids closing over his eyes and his body collapsing forward. Line break. Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage, the man who had stared the Kyuubi in the eyes and stood strong, could not believe his eyes when he and his ANBU investigated the mysterious boom they had heard. A house, belonging to a civilian family, was just destroyed. It was obvious that some sort of explosion had happened, considering that the house was torn apart and thrown all around the vicinity. The tall blonde man strode forward, entering what would have been the house, and looking around. Striding forward once more, the man knelt down and grabbed a piece of debris that was in the dead center of the house. Lifting it easily, the man's sapphire eyes widened considerably when he found a child, the same age as his precious Natsumi-chan, laying within the debris, his shirt torn and shredded across his torso. Cautiously, Minato fed his hands beneath the boy and cradled him into his chest as his ANBU checked the rest of the house. Flipping him over, Minato stared at the face of the civilian boy. He has blonde hair like mine. Why have I not seen this boy around the village before? I wonder if he goes to the academy. Perhaps Natsumi-chan would know him. Even so, what is he doing here? How did he live? Ponderings flew within Minato's head as he stared at the child, the small boy's soft breathing assuring the Hokage that he was still alive. Minato sighed, however, and stood up. He would have to get the boy medical help, after all. Umbu! Search the area and try to find me a cause. Figure out what happened here! Minato ordered, his voice stern and powerful, before he disappeared in a yellow flash. Line break. Voices, faces, memories. Everything returned to Naruto, the boy's eyes flying open as he sat up quickly, eyes frantically scanning the area around him. Where wa dash? Naruto muttered, breathing steadily slowing down as he figured out where he was. Why was he in a hospital? He was fine. It was his family that needed medical attention, not him. Naruto looked around him, and down at his body, his eyes locking onto the 4 in his arm. Furiously, Naruto lowered his arm to it and gripped it. Naruto was about to yank it out of his arm when a firm hand grasped over his, stopping him in his attempt to pull the 4 out of his arm. Shocked, Naruto raised his head to meet the stern eyes of a blonde woman, Hazel meeting Violet as the pair just stared at each other. I wouldn't do that if I were you, brat. Her voice, it was annoyed. It matched her face, Naruto decided. His eyes flashed over the diamond in the center of her forehead, but he said nothing. She had some sort of green overcoat with a gray top underneath. Naruto couldn't find the words to describe what she was wearing. It was so odd to him. Nothing like he would have expected. He couldn't help but attempt to quench his childish curiosity as the woman walked over and sat down on a rolling stool, retrieving a clipboard from the wall and staring down at it. Whyy? Why aren't you wearing, like doctor stuff? The boy questioned, the woman looking up from her clipboard and staring at him with an annoyed gaze. None of your business, brat. The woman replied, narrowing her eyes as she saw him pout angrily. Hey, I don't think that's very good, What did Toussaint call it? Yeah. That's not very good bedside manner. Naruto chided the woman, pointing his finger at her accusingly. The woman reeled back, her face distorting into a very noticeable grimace, before she snarled at him. I don't need to have good bedside manner, brat. When you're the best doctor there is, bedside manner doesn't mean anything. The woman spoke, with a little more volume and force than she meant. This only served to fuel the boy more. I don't care if you're the friggin' god of hospitals or something. When you are a doctor, someone who is supposed to help people, you're supposed to be nice. Respectable. Kind! The boy shouted, his voice gaining volume and force to match hers. The woman stared at him, narrowing her eyes, before shaking her head and returning to her clipboard. Shut up, brat! She ordered, hiding her smirk when the boy began to fume angrily, groaning frustratedly, before flopping back onto the bed. Whatever. Where are my parents? They should be here as well. Naruto demanded, staring at the woman who allowed her lips to part slightly, her brows lowering sadly, before she lightly shook her head and her face grew stern once more. They're not here, kid. I don't know where they are, though I'm sure Minato Gaki knows. The woman responded, temporarily easing the boy's mind and allowing him to sink into his bed a little more relaxed. Naruto's ears picked up the sound of a chair rolling across floor, before the woman's face shadowed over his, a clipboard in her hands. Now I've got some questions. What's your name, kid? The woman began, Naruto narrowing his eyes. What? You guys know who I am, don't be silly. Naruto muttered angrily. He'd been to this very hospital before. He was born here, for crying out loud. Oi, don't you get snappy with me, brat. We've got a bunch of blondes, but you're not a Yamanaka or a Namikaze, and we for sure don't have anyone eyes like yours. Now, who are you? The woman demanded, frustratingly glaring into the boy's eyes. Naruto's eyes widened, however. What do I mean? I've got blue eyes just like the Hokage. Naruto snarled, angry and frustrated with this woman. Her hazel eyes narrowed, before she grumbled about stupid kids and grabbed a mirror from, where the hell did she get that mirror? Look, brat. I don't know about you, but those aren't eyes I've seen before. The woman muttered, handing Naruto the mirror. The boy looked at her, before raising the mirror up to his face, making his eyes widen. What the? The boy whispered, holding the mirror with one hand and pulling at his eyelids with the other. He turned and twisted his face, pulled at his cheeks and eyelids, staring at his new eyes. They were a regal purple, concentric rings surrounding a small dot-like pupil that didn't expand or constrict to meet different light amounts like his old pupil. Like normal pupils. Naruto merely stared at his eyes. This was the scene that Minato Namikaze walked in on, the mirror hiding Naruto's face from his. The boy was too occupied with his eyes to hear the door open and close. Minato looked at Tsunade, the woman shaking her head at him. Damn, so far she hadn't learned anything about what happened. Well, Minato knew he could be pretty persuasive. Hey kid, I'm the Yandame Hokage. Minato offered, sitting down on the bed and looking at the blonde head behind the mirror. Then, the boy dropped the mirror and Nyanto's eyes widened upon seeing the eye within the boy's head. Is that the... I'll have to get your eye, sensei. Minato thought to himself, schooling his features and staring into the hypnotic purple gaze of the boy. Minato felt as if his world tore down, the white walls of the hospital shredding around him as a void began to take hold of him. Naruto's body began to rip. Long, vertical pieces of his body tearing away until all that remained, floating in the air, were his ringed eyes. Tsunade, frozen as the world around her was, fell to the ground and shattered into pieces that melted into the black void that surrounded Minato and the eyes. Minato twisted his body and turned around, looking out of the window, and watched as the rest of the world tore away as well. Minato tried to run, but wherever he went, the eyes followed, floating behind him until the rest of the world was torn, evaporated in the everlasting darkness. Minato turned around, falling onto his back and scrambling to get away from the purple eyes that slowly floated towards him. Stop! Get away from me! Minato ordered, shouting in fear as his throat tore. He grit his teeth, reeling away from the eyes as they continued to float towards him. Slowly, a body began to form around the eyes. To Minato's shock, it was not Naruto's body, but instead an older man with horns began to form around the eyes. A white cloak formed over his body, black symbols aligning his neck. Eventually, the man finished taking form, and merely floated above Minato, a red eye adorning the center of his forehead, open and intimidating as Minato found that he could not take his eyes off of it. Who are you? Minato demanded, his voice shaking with fear dripping off of every syllable. The man did not say anything. Minato glared, and continued to shout and scream at the man. The man's lips parted, and his right hand raised. Silence! Minato went to disobey, his mouth dropping open and his lungs expanding as they took in air, before that air was brutally forced out as an invisible force slammed into Minato's chest, forcing him back as his body ragdolled and rolled away from the man. The three-eyed figure merely floated over towards Minato's body once more. Hokage-sama. Minato rolled over onto his back, glaring at the man who floated above him, though he followed the man's order and remained silent. The man narrowed his eyes, power radiating from his entire essence, before he spoke. Minato Namikaze. Hokage-sama. Yandame Hokage of Konohagakure. Hokage-sama. You asked who I was? Let me inform you. Hokage-sama. My name is Hokage-sama. Suddenly, the void Minato found himself and began to bleed color. Buildings, forestry, Konoha began to take form around him. Minato saw the man's body tearing and fading. Wait! Tell me! Who are you? Minato shouted, raising his hand towards the rapidly fading body. The man's eyes softened, a smile coming onto his features. I am Naruto. His words faded as his body did, only his purple eyes remained as Naruto's body took form around them. Minato found that he was still staring at the child, who had narrowed his eyes at him, Tsunade hovering over the blond man and slapping his face. Shaking his head, with, What? Escaping his mouth, Minato turned his gaze away from the hypnotic rings of the purple eyes. Sorry. Minato muttered, shakily standing up and leaving the room quickly. Naruto watched him go, wondering exactly what was wrong with the Hokage he had long admired. Line break. Naruto sighed. Recently, his life had become horrible. His family had been brutally murdered by some crazed asshole that broke into his house. So, there was that. Now, he was living alone, in some random apartment provided to him by the Hokage. And to top it all off, his eyes were so weird now. God, Naruto hated looking at them. They both intrigued and frightened him. And he hadn't told anyone about it, but sometimes if he stared into them long enough, it looked like the very world around him would begin to tear like paper. Long, vertical strips of his wall would suddenly start to come down and evaporate as they went. However, it stopped and his world returned to normal as soon as he stopped looking into his own eyes. Actually, Naruto wondered if he was dreaming. The Hokage had tried to tell him that his house had blown up for no reason. What? He may only be 12, he may be the dead last of the academy, but houses don't just blow up for no reason. He wasn't that stupid. Plus, there was that really weird 5 minutes that the Hokage just stared into his eyes, almost like he was in a trance. Naruto wondered if the man had experienced the same tearing that he did. Naruto! Naruto's ponderings were cut short as an annoyed voice called out for him. Shocked, Naruto quickly took his head off of his desk and looked around, surprised. A small amount of drool whipped out of his mouth as he did so. Wahoo? Naruto questioned, looking around, until his eyes met Iruka-sensei's, the man glaring at him. For the last time, Naruto, don't fall asleep in my class! Iruka ordered, throwing an eraser at Naruto's head, which hit him square in the forehead and caused the boy to fall backwards in his seat, falling with the wooden furniture. The class laughed at him, and Naruto looked around. Everywhere around him were faceless figures, only their wide, laughing grins visible. The chirping of birds, the colors of the classroom, everything blended and melted together into a haze of laughter and pointed fingers. Naruto looked all around him, whipping his body back and forth, twisting in some sort of crazed anxiety as he tried to escape the scrutiny of his classmates. He could find no such solace. Tears started to build in Naruto's eyes, the rippled purple frantically gazing past all of the grins. Stop! The laughter persisted. Stop! The laughter persisted. Stop! The laughter stopped, as Naruto's head quickly raising off of his desk as he sucked in his drool, the class turning around to look at him with bored, annoyed expressions on their faces. Iruka turned around as well, before smirking. So you decided to grace us with your presence after such a wonderful rest, then, Naruto? The class snickered, but Naruto found that it was much more tolerable than the laughter from what he guessed was actually a dream, or in this case a nightmare. Iruka, seeing that he had successfully gotten the class to laugh, turned around once more and began to write on the chalkboard, returning to whatever history crap he had been talking about before. Naruto slumped forward, placing his chin on his forearms, his purple eyes sweeping over the room. Why was he so alone now? Did he really not have anyone outside of his parents? His ringed eyes swept over the room again, searching for a single person. A friend. Did he really not have any friends? Was that why whenever he thought of the academy, he felt lonely? His search stopped on a red-haired girl, who for some reason was looking at him. Her sapphire eyes dug into his royal purple ones. Kurama. The voice from before returned, causing Naruto's eyes to widen and the boy to look all around him. Huh! Who's there? Naruto called out, the class giggling as they turned to look at him. Naruto caught the gaze of the red-haired girl once more, who then sneered at him and turned around, clearly angry at something. The class turned around once more, Iruka looking angry at Naruto's outburst but doing nothing about it. He had heard about his parents' murder, so he could at least cut the boy slack when he was awake. But still, no one would sleep in his class. Naruto slumped forward once more, burying his face in his arms. His black shirt pulled at his chest, stretched slightly. He did not mind. He looked at the wood of his desk, his eyes lazily tracing the patterns within the furniture. Lonely. Why do I feel so alone? Is no one in class willing to give me a chance? Naruto pondered, sorrowful thoughts taking a hold of his head before an eraser hit the back of it, summoning the boy's head to rise. Naruto! Who is the Shodai Hokage? Iruka demanded, annoyed as he rubbed at the ridge of his face, waiting to berate the child for yet another wrong answer. Naruto looked at the man blankly, trying in vain to remember, before suddenly the information flooded his mind. The Shodai Hokage, known to those close to him as Hashirama Senju, was the only known wielder of the Mokuton, or wood release. He was able to create this jutsu style by infusing earth and water chakra together, creating wood. He became a master of his new bloodline, but did not allow himself to be limited by it. Instead, he also worked on normal jutsu styles and taijutsu, becoming a legendary shinobi. He had befriended Madara Uchiha, the progenitor of the Uchiha clan, and the pair of legendary shinobi created Konohagakure, the first hidden village. After being brought up in a time of warring clans fighting for power, Hashirama decided he wanted peace. Using his Mokuton, he gathered the 9 Bijou, and gave them away, keeping the 9 tails within Konoha, or specifically sealing it within his wife, Mito Uzumaki. Hashirama died as a legendary shinobi, which to some has still not been surpassed to this day. Naruto finished, looking a little shocked that he knew the knowledge as the entire class was as well. Iruka was shocked because he, the teacher, didn't know some of the things Naruto spoke of. Very good, Naruto. Iruka stated, baffled as he never expected those words to leave his mouth. Naruto stared at the class, who were looking at him with wide eyes, before shrinking away from their gazes, shy and embarrassed. He had never received praise from anyone other than his parents before, and it was all so new to him. Well, anyway, class, I think that's enough lecturing for today. After all, you are 4th-year students, meaning this is your last year in the academy should you pass the Genin exam. So, we might as well get you started fighting, any? Iruka questioned with a smile, his eyes squinting. His smile was met with shouts of happiness from the students, though Naruto looked apprehensive, going noticed only by a couple of people who had taken an interest in the boy. One of these people was observing him through the windows of the room, more particularly, his eyes. Naruto followed the class as they were ushered out, trailing slightly behind but still keeping. He observed, watched as the students almost seemed to jump up and down in excitement. Why were they excited? They were being led to a battleground, where they would learn to kill each other. His view of the academy, and of shinobi had been steadily shifting over nights of dreamy sleep, thoughts that belonged to a past version of him flooding his mind. Memories, vague and blurry to his mind's eye for the current time, flew past. Naruto's goal in life had changed. No longer did he want to be the best shinobi, to become the Hokage. No, in fact, he wanted peace. He wanted to bring the world the peace it so rightfully deserved. Perhaps being a shinobi was the correct path to that peace. He did not know. It confused him, boggled his mind. He found that, occasionally, it was all he could think of. He wondered if it was because he had nothing better to do, merely sitting alone, in his small, quiet apartment. Why hadn't the Hokage put him in the orphanage again? Oh, yeah? He told him not to. Right. Alright, class. It's going to be a basic one-on-one style of sparring. We will randomly match you up with your opponent, and whoever wins will be gifted 5 points of extra credit. That seemed stupid to Naruto. That was rewarding clan heirs and students who were already practicing, and putting down those that weren't. And randomly selecting partners? That was ridiculous. While, yes, they would eventually be put up against vastly differing enemies out in the field, to be that far in strength where they had no experience, no knowledge on how to handle situations like that, it was stupid. And another thing, why the hell did Naruto suddenly care? And how was he even thinking of this stuff? Naruto shook his head, ridding it of such thoughts, and proceeded to just wait for whatever fight he would have. Naruto vs. Iruka dug his hand into the pouch they were using to draw names. Withdrawing the small piece of paper, Iruka brought it to his eyes. Naruto vs. Sasuke Uchiha! Iruka shouted, the class muttering amongst themselves, a few bets even taking place. Naruto entered the ring, and stared at his raven-haired opponent. The pale-skinned girl was staring at him, emotions locked away behind her ebony eyes. She gracefully settled into a stance, no doubt taught to her by her family, before she nodded her head towards Iruka. Naruto narrowed his eyes, merely standing there, and nodded his head towards Iruka. He knew he would lose, there was no point in settling into a stance. Naruto, are you sure? You're not even going to take a stance? Iruka questioned, some of the students laughing. Even Sasuke cracked a smirk. Naruto dragged his gaze lazily up towards Iruka. Well, obviously I am outclassed here, Iruka-sensei. There is no point in trying against a clan member, when I myself have had no prior training and I haven't bothered to learn the academy style because I know it is pointless in the long run. Our Jounin senseis are likely to find a proper stance for us, and the academy one is really only used to get us used to fighting, is it not? Naruto questioned, Iruka shocked at his inquisitiveness, before rubbing the bridge of his nose frustrated. Naruto, you should at least try. Why, sensei? Truly, why? It is not like this will affect my grade, for only the winner receives extra credit, and this is not truly a graded assignment. Naruto fired back, staring at his teacher with his hypnotic purple eyes. You said it yourself, Naruto, this is to get you used to fighting. So you should get used to it, any? Iruka questioned, and smirked when Naruto turned his gaze back to Sasuke. Meh, I have no stance anyway. And Iruka promptly sweat dropped when the class laughed. Fine, fine. Hajime! Iruka called out, dropping his arm down to signal the start of the fight. Sasuke rushed forward, a determined look in her eye. Naruto watched, annoyed and just waiting for his defeat, until he noticed something. He could see her movements, see what she would do before she did it. How? How was he doing this? Surely, he could win if he knew what she would do prior to doing it, right? Naruto smirked, deciding that he stood a chance of winning. As Sasuke surged forward, Naruto watched. Suddenly, Sasuke reeled her arm back and prepared to launch it at his chest. Naruto dodged to his left, and slinked his arm around her waist, throwing her away from him with his right arm. The class was shocked, none more so than Sasuke. She grinned slightly, though squashed it as she got up, steadying back into her stance, before rocketing off once more, this time at an even greater speed. Naruto's eyes widened, as she approached much faster than he anticipated. Her fist connected squarely on his sternum, and launched the boy backwards. Naruto stumbled backwards, coughing, and opened his eyes in time to catch the girl rushing him once more. She's preparing a kick, crap! Naruto thought, ducking quickly, dropping down actually onto his butt, as he did not have the skill to complete the drop and be able to get back up. Naruto looked up, watching as she went to drop her leg onto him once more. Naruto quickly rolled over onto his right, but hit her other leg, and now found himself trapped beneath her. Sasuke growled lowly, a light blush escaping onto her cheeks, before she dropped down with an elbow to Naruto's face. Naruto saw stars, his eyes closing and opening rapidly and slowly at the same time. Ugh! Naruto moaned, his vision clearing to see Sasuke preparing to punch him in the face again, her legs on his arms and pinning him there. Crap! Naruto thought, trying to frantically get out of the situation. The arm lowered, but Naruto rolled over slightly, knocking Sasuke over and allowing Naruto to scramble up, away from the girl. Can't you try to win by getting me out of the circle instead of knocking me out? Naruto demanded angrily, some blood leaking from his mouth slightly where she had elbowed him. Sasuke got up angrily, pointing at him. You were the one that rolled underneath me! Sasuke shouted back. Naruto growled, stomping up and jabbing his finger in the center of her chest. And you were the one trying to kick me to Kingdom Come! Naruto accused, the pair glaring at each other. Kiba suddenly giggled, and shouted out. Kiss already! Naruto and Sasuke blushed, looked at each other, before glaring and jumping away from each other hastily. Winner Naruto! Iruka's voice cut out. Huh! Both Sasuke and Naruto questioned, turning their heads to stare at Iruka in bewilderment. Sasuke stepped out of the ring, and gave up the win. Iruka supplied, and the class looked at her feet, finding one completely out of the ring. She had jumped far enough away from Naruto to lose. Naruto grinned, he had actually won. That was a first. Naruto scanned his classmates' eyes, searching their eyes for approval. Instead, he found pity and amusement. They pitied Sasuke. Why? Naruto then met Sasuke's eyes, and saw that she was incredibly angry. She was glaring at him. Naruto swore he could feel heat hit his face as she glared, and it felt as if he was going to die. Line break. Naruto sighed, hanging his head down as he strode out of the academy, a swarm of students flowing from the building. He hastily shoved his hands into his pants, his white shirt fluttering in the wind slightly. He looked up, gazing around him. He saw many students jump into their parents' arms. Of course, these were the early entry students, the 5- and 6-year-olds. He saw families gather to pick up their children. He saw siblings laugh and giggle with each other as they ran out. It hurt. Naruto felt his chest clench, his heart beating within his very ears. His eyes, every time it beat, darkness surged through his eyes in tiny tendrils that vanished immediately after, only to come back with each beat. Why? Naruto smiled softly. He knew why. He was grieving. Why wasn't he crying? He began to walk forward once more, hanging his head again. He knew why he wasn't crying. It was more of a resigned grief. He knew it had happened, and that he didn't have the power to change that. He didn't know why, but a surge of something flowed through his eyes as he thought about that. Perhaps he could resurrect them? He had seen ninjas do almost anything he could think of. Spew fire dragons from their mouths, create copies of themselves, even walk the corridors of others' minds. All with chakra. Perhaps chakra could bring back his parents? Naruto's mind wandered down dark paths as he walked, his body bouncing and swaying with each step. His purple eyes pulsated power, though he did not feel it. Naruto's thoughts were interrupted by a firm grip on his shoulder, which pulled him around. Naruto found himself whipped around, his purple eyes meeting the enraged ebony ones of Sasuke Uchiha. The girl glared before drawing back her arm and slamming her fist into Naruto's cheek. Gah! Naruto cried out in pain, his body twisting in the air and sending him onto the ground, dragging through the dirt. Ugh, what the hell? Naruto groaned, slowly getting up, only to fall back down by a kick to his back. Hey! Stop it! Stop! Naruto cried out as the girl proceeded to stomp on his back. Sasuke! That is enough! A stern older voice called out. Naruto looked over his shoulder to watch as Sasuke was pulled back by the arm by an older Uchiha boy, red Sharingan spinning angrily in his eyes. Mind explaining to me exactly why you are bullying this young boy? The boy questioned sternly, his Sharingan slowing down slightly. Sasuke met his gaze defiantly, glaring at him. He humiliated me! Sasuke shouted back at her brother. Naruto groaned, getting up. It wasn't my fault you jumped out of the ring! Naruto shouted angrily, pointing a finger at her as he held his chest. Sasuke growled, before pointing her finger at Naruto as well. You were going to. Why you were going to kiss me? Sasuke shouted angrily, her cheeks reddening slightly. Naruto growled, dropping his arm and glaring. As if. Who'd kiss you, a toad? Naruto countered, this infuriating Sasuke more, much to the confusion of Naruto. He didn't know why she was doing that. Unfortunately, Itachi did. He sighed, rubbing the ridge of his nose. He had a decision to make here. Should he A. just take his sister home and leave it at that? B. Take her home and question her on where she stood with the boy? C. Question her here? Or D. Tell her to get over her little lover's quarrel in public, confusing the boy and embarrassing his sister? Option B. If she likes that boy, then I've gotta straighten her out. She'll only drive him away like this. Itachi thought to himself, before gripping her shoulder and poofing away with a swift use of Shunshin. Naruto looked at where the pair had just been, before groaning and clutching his aching chest. Just what was wrong with that girl? Line break. Pain stared at the crowd that had gathered before him, from 6 different views. 5 were hidden, watching the aimed citizens and waiting, while 1 stood confidently in front of the crowd, face stern and purple eyes glowing. I am God. Whether you believe me or not will not change the fact that I am God. Pain spoke, his words cold and emotionless. His purple eyes, the ones belonging to the non-hidden path, gazed across the crowd of civilians. None of them believed him. His eyes narrowed seeing this. A gruff old man stepped forward, his gray goatee flowing down from his chin to his sternum. He adjusted a pair of glasses on his nose before smirking. If you really are God, a deity, what could you even do for us, huh? You look human, you sound human, and if I was creepy, I'd walk up to you, and I'd bet you'd even smell human. There is nothing you have that we do not. The man defiantly spoke, his eyes alight with confidence matching Pain's. The man controlling the body struggled, a grimace contorting his face. He wanted, so very badly, to make these people listen. To make them see him as God. But he knew that if he did that, he'd be no better than Hanzo the Salamander. He wanted to distance his rule from that man's rule as much as he could. I assure you that I can do much, much more than any of you can. Pain responded, emotionlessly standing in front of the crowd like a statue. The man chuckled, bringing his hand to his gut and bending forward while the crowd behind him nervously chuckled with him. Hanzo the Salamander thought the same as you. But there is one thing that no one, not even he, not even you, could do. So tell me, God, if you really are a deity, if you really are a god, then tell me this. Can you stop the rain? This question caught Pain off guard, and he chided himself. Surely, he could stop the rain. The man in front of him continued. Let's make a deal, Mr. God. If you can stop the rain, for 10 seconds, just 10 seconds, then I will bow my head and call you God. The man offered, smirking confidently. Pain wanted to kill this man, but only his real face showed it. Fine. Pain's emotionless response came. The orange-haired man's head rolled back, his purple eyes glowing as the rain hit them. This had to be possible. He had to make these people believe him. Slowly, he raised his hands, and allowed the body to channel his power through the metal piercings within it. Power began to rumble through the arms of the visible path, and eventually, he willed it to speak. Shinra Tensei. The path muttered, stern and cold, before the rain stopped, hitting some sort of force field. The man stepped forward, his mouth dropped, and he reached his hand underneath the field. It was dry. No way. The man muttered before snarling. You've got to keep this up for 7 more seconds, chump. The man informed, snarling angrily. He'd bowed to no false god. Pain, at least the path, did not respond. The man behind the paths shook with exertion. He even started to cough and choke. No! He could do it! Only 4 more seconds now. He could do it! Suddenly, the red-haired man lurched forward and spat out blood. The path's arms dropped, and the rain slammed back down onto him, his orange hair sticking to his face. The man stepped back, crossed his arms, and smirked. You are no god. You are a man, much like me. I bow to no man. The goatee man chided, turning around and disappearing into the crowd as it began to disperse. Pain stared at the ground, as it splashed with droplets of rain. Why had he failed? The Rikudo Sennin was hailed as a god, a true god that could do anything. Why couldn't he? He had the eyes of the Sennin, the eyes of God. And he failed? How was that possible? Jiraiya had said he was the child of Prophet No. That was it. Jiraiya had been wrong about how to achieve peace. That meant he was wrong about his eyes. These were not the eyes of the Rikudo Sennin. They were a cheap knockoff. Fakes. Imitations. The Rikudo Sennin's eyes were said to allow him to create anything. All pain could create was death, destruction, and ironically enough pain. He had failed to become strong enough to force the world into peace. No. He hadn't. He just didn't have the tailed beasts yet. Yeah. That was it. That had to be it. Yahiko's body tilted its head back up once more, the path of pain reunited with the other paths once they jumped down with it. We are pain. We are God. We are peace. The paths said in unison, before jumping away. Line break. Naruto wandered throughout Konoha, aimlessly walking without any real purpose or destination. He was looking at his feet, watching each step his feet took. He watched the path beneath him as it blurred with his movement. He raised his head randomly, feeling compelled to. He realized why the path seemed familiar. He was staring at his house. Why had his feet made him wander here? Perhaps he wasn't as okay with their deaths as he thought he was? He chuckled, despite the crazy looks he received from those around him. Why was he even calling a crater a house? It was a marker, telling those that saw it where his house used to be. It was no longer there, and it was no longer a house. Naruto felt something wet hit his head. Two more somethings hit his head and pierced the canopy of his hair, allowing the wetness to reach his scalp. Naruto looked up, droplets of liquid hitting his face and sliding down his cheeks. Oh. It was starting to rain. That's what it was. Rain. Funny. He almost worried that he was going to look up and see blood hitting his face. Naruto dropped his head, walking forward into the center of the crater as the rain grew in intensity, before Naruto found himself standing in the middle of a downpour, standing in what used to be his house, now reduced to a crater. How had that ever happened? Houses didn't just explode. Nothing just exploded for no reason. Naruto looked up once more, before looking down with a grunt. Some rain had gotten into his eye. It was cold. It hurt. It stung actually. Naruto picked at his eye, rubbing it softly. Stupid rain. It was so irritating now. Why could he feel every single drop? Why was it so persistent? It was annoying, incredibly so. Gah, he just wanted it to stop. Stop! 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 Naruto screamed out, flailing his arms out and pulling at his hair. He continued to pull, scrunching his eyes and trying to rip his hair out. Hey Naruto! What are you doing? I mean with the rain? A meek, weak voice came out behind Naruto. The boy turned around angrily, snarling as he dropped his arms and scanned the area behind him. His eyes widened and his snarl dropped when he found the Namake's princess standing behind him. Huh? What did you say? Naruto questioned, turning around to look at her. In the back of his mind he noted he didn't feel the rain anymore. Why was that? He supposed it just stopped raining. I was just asking what you were doing with the rain. The Namake's girl questioned once more, pointing above Naruto. Naruto gave her an odd look, like she was crazy, before he looked above him. His jaw dropped as he did so. What the? Naruto muttered. For what he saw was rain just bouncing off of some sort of barrier. It was above him, it surrounded his house crater, and didn't allow a single drop of rain to pierce it. Whoa! Naruto mumbled, walking forward towards the edge of the barrier, and attempting to reach out and touch it. It moved away from his touch, expanded, and suddenly the area where the rain did not touch was larger. This is so weird. But it's like cool. Naruto spoke out loud, to himself mostly. He was almost shocked when the Namake's girl stepped towards him and spoke as well. How are you doing this? She questioned, her voice smooth and calm. Why didn't Naruto remember her voice sounding like that? Wait, did she ever speak to Naruto before? Naruto shook his head, deciding to just answer her question. I don't know. I don't even know if I'm the one doing this. Naruto answered, staring at the barrier with a childish awe lighting up his eyes. Naruto did not notice the Namikaze girl step a little closer to him, reaching her hand out to touch the barrier. Naruto watched in fascination as the barrier did not grow for her, and her hand actually pushed past it. She withdrew her hand and looked at it. It was now drenched. This is really cool, Naruto! She squealed in delight. Naruto looked at her with a slight blush. Why did he like the way his name rolled off of her tongue? She looked at him, before her eyes widened. Naruto! Your eyes, they're glowing, she told him, locked onto his eyes and staring at them. Wait, really? Naruto exclaimed, reeling back and trying to find something to look at his eyes with. The Namikaze girl nodded her head vigorously, clearly excited by the gleam in her eye and the childish smile she had plastered onto her face. Are you channeling chakra to your eyes, Naruto? The girl questioned, staring intently at him. Naruto furrowed his eyebrows. I don't know how to do that, Naruto mumbled, looking away from the girl with an embarrassed look. What did you say, Naruto? The girl pestered once more, leaning closer into him to try and hear him. I said I don't know how to do that, okay? Naruto told her loudly, angrily shaking his fists. God, now she'd make fun of him. Like everyone else had. It wasn't his fault his parents were just merchants. Naruto huffed and turned around, crossing his arms and angrily glaring at the crater that was once his home. He felt a soft grip on his shoulder, prompting him to turn around reluctantly. He met the soft smiling face of the Namikaze girl. That's all right, at least it answers my question. You didn't always have those purple eyes of yours, did you? The girl questioned like she already knew the answer. Naruto looked at her oddly, tilting his head and raising a brow, before shaking his head and touching his chin. No, my eyes were blue before. Naruto started shaking, looking down at the crater of his home. Before. Naruto balled his fists, tears began to build in his eyes. Before my parents died. His voice was cold, his shaking suddenly stopped, and a single tear dripped off of his nose. The girl placed her other hand on his other shoulder, and snaked the other one further around his back and patted it slightly. Hey, it's all right. You're okay, aren't you? She asked, trying to console him. No. No, it's not all right. I get to live while my parents don't. That man took them away from me for no reason. And he smiled while he did it. Naruto growled, grasping in front of his stomach for something to strangle. He was so angry now. Why was he angry? He didn't understand. He knew he couldn't get them back, so why was he angry? He should be thankful he's alive. He knows they wouldn't want him to be mad, so why was he? Naruto's lips parted and he stopped grasping the area in front of him, a high-pitched ringing blocking out any other noise. Why was he mad? Was this what revenge was? This cruel, cold feeling in his chest? It constricted his lungs, pressed on his heart, made it feel like his ribs were going to crack under the pressure. Naruto decided he didn't like the feeling. Naruto raised his head and met the wishy-worried eyes of the Namikaze girl. Then Naruto furrowed his brows. Why didn't he know her name? It was on the tip of his tongue. Why couldn't he think of it? His anger was forgotten, cast away, when he realized this fact. Had he not been so absorbed with thinking of her name, he would have wondered about how he found it so easy to forget his anger. Hey, I'm sorry, but what's your name? Naruto asked shyly, looking away from her to avoid the embarrassment it would generate, and the anger he'd see in her eyes. She looked at him, before shaking her head and dislodging her arms from around him. It's Natsumi, Namika — oh shut up, I know you're a Namikaze. All everyone calls you is the Namikaze princess. Pfft. That's stupid. I wanted to know your name so I didn't become one of those idiots. Naruto told her with conviction, his eyes fiery. Natsumi stared at him, her lips parting and her mouth trying to formulate words, before she settled on a smile. That means a lot to me. Most people see me as the Hokage's daughter. But I just want them to look at me and see Natsumi, not Namake's or my father or Hokage's daughter or anything stupid like that. Natsumi explained, looking down with a sad expression. She felt Naruto's hand grip her shoulder tightly, the boy knowing no restraint with anything he did, before he tipped her chin up with his index finger. She looked into his eyes, and watched as he raised a finger up to point at her while his eyes narrowed and his mouth twisted into a grimace. Don't give me that crap, alright? Those people are idiots. They are stupid idiots just trying to get in good with you so that they can get closer to your father. I don't give a crap about your dad being the Hokage. All I see him as is someone to surpass. Someone to get better than. So, Natsumi, don't give me this sap story, alright? Because I don't need it. I only saw you as the Namake's girl, because everyone was too stupid to tell me your real name, and I wasn't interested enough to go and ask you. But now I see you for who you are. Natsumi. Not Natsumi Namake's, just Natsumi. Got that? Naruto questioned angrily, his finger pointing at her and making jabbing motions when he finished. Despite his rough nature, and his extremely blunt words, Natsumi found herself smiling, nodding her head as he dislodged his grip from her shoulder. Good. Naruto groaned out, turning around to look at the barrier around them again. He stared at it, before walking to the other end of the barrier, the one closer to the road, or where his door used to be. He touched the barrier, and once more it expanded. How far do you think this can get? Naruto questioned out loud, though he did not wait for Natsumi's answer before he pressed forward once more. The barrier stretched to accommodate him as he began to walk forward, and Naruto gained confidence, running forward, the barrier matching his speed and stretching forward. The rain did not hit Naruto, nor did it hit Natsumi, who watched from his house. Naruto looked up, excited as he ran, until a single droplet of rain hit the very center of his forehead, and flowed down between his eyes. Huh! Naruto muttered before suddenly the rain began to pour once more, the barrier gone. Natsumi watched from the crater as Naruto stared up at the rain, the dark sky meeting his gaze and unwavering in its own gaze. She went to reach out for him with her hand but stopped. Why had she never seen this before? Why did the boy look so lonely? He merely stood there, in the rain, his shoulders slumped forward and his arms dangling down to his thighs. He just stood there. Aimlessly. He looked lost. Natsumi reached out with her hand, but found that whatever words she could have formed died in her throat. She felt her chest clench slightly, before she shook her head and ran to him. Pain stared at the figure that stood across from him, bathed in shadow. The only feature that Pain could make out, even with all 6 of his paths staring at the figure, was the mirrored image of the Rinnegan, glowing from the figure's shadowed face. As if the pair choreographed a dance, the Deva path and the figure raised a hand to each other, palms out and fingers extended. Their ringed eyes met, power dripping from the eyes like tears, before Pain muttered, Shinra Tensei. Nothing happened. Neither figure moved, though Pain's eyes widened. Impossible. You shouldn't be able to dash, heh? The figure interrupted Pain with a short chuckle, dropping its arm but keeping its gaze locked onto Pain's eyes. The figure did not react other than raise an arm to the jutsu hurled at it by Konan, surprisingly not a paper jutsu. The jutsu merely met a barrier in front of the figure's hand, and promptly sank into nothingness. Pain's eyes once more widened. He knew what the figure had done, he had done it numerous times in his life. Pain watched as the figure smirked, brilliant white teeth shining despite its blackened body. The figure opened its mouth, but only vague, muffled mumbles left its mouth, annoying Pain and frightening him at the same time. The shadowed figure then withdrew its head and laughed boisterously. The laughter haunted Pain, his paths falling at the feet of Yahiko's body. Before that 2 followed, holding their heads and howling, shrill and pained. Nagato's real body, dislodged from the statue that taunted him and kept him alive all at the same time. Nagato began to hold his head, palms covering his ears, just trying to stop the sounds, the howling shrieks of his paths, before suddenly the bodies slumped forward, the Rinnegan in their eyes fading. Nagato panted, holding his chest and looking at the figure, which was no longer smiling, Instead, its Rinnegan eyes pierced through the eternal darkness surrounding Nagato and the figure. Slowly, the figure began to approach Nagato. The red-haired man's eyes widened, his face twisting and churning into a scared, frightful grimace as he stumbled backwards. Stay away from me! Nagato screamed, his throat tearing and shredding. The figure persisted, even when Nagato fell and continued to try to scramble away despite the rapidly approaching shadowy figure. Eventually, Nagato felt as if he hit a wall, and he cast his terrified gaze up at the figure standing before him. The figure turned its head left and right, looking around the darkened area they were in. Your mind, it has deteriorated. This is Hanzo's doing, is it not? The figure questioned randomly, looking down at Pain. The man just continued to stare at him in fear. HMPF. Of course you don't understand. My apologies, I'm used to Jinchuriki minds. My name is... Suddenly, glowing purple chains wrapped around the figure, pulling it back slowly. Damn it, I don't have much time. The figure grunted out, resisting the chains and attempting to reach out and touch Nagato's forehead. I need you to understand. The figure grunted out, trying in vain to touch Nagato's forehead, missing the pale canvas just barely, before the chains glowed brighter. Nagato stared at the blonde hair that seemed to be mixing with an odd tannish color, tan skin mixing with an odd palish chalk. The figure grunted, horns slightly protruding from its forehead, a third eye in the center of its forehead barely, ever so barely, creaking open, glowing red. It struggled against the chains, its eyes meeting Nagato's. My name is... Hager. The figure stopped, looking down at nothing, contemplating. It raised its head again, before suddenly it was pulled back into the darkness with a blurring speed. Line break. Glowing violet, concentric ringed eyes stared dully forward, casting a soft, almost unnoticeable glow across the fingers laced over the mouth of the owner of said eyes. Blonde hair hung shaggily over the forehead of the owner, one large lock falling between both eyes, though it was cast slightly to the left, clipping the edge of the purple eye that rests behind it. The eyes closed, the owner withdrawing backwards with a sigh as he removed his hands from his mouth, instead dropping the right one onto the wooden table, the left hand reaching back and resting over the backrest of the wooden chair he was seated in. The eyes of Naruto opened once more, staring with boredom at the Chunin instructor known as Iraka Yumino, who was busy giving the class a last-minute speech before he announced their teams. It irritated Naruto to no end. The man spoke of his students, how he was proud of them, how he believed they would lead lives of greatness and earn glory for themselves. Naruto frowned at that particular thought. Lately, Naruto found that he no longer saw the glory others did in one's ability to kill. One such example was the Yondaime Hokage. He had gained fame through his ability to slaughter entire armies within seconds. Why would a man with such killing potential be granted fame instead of infamy? Why did the human race respect its ability to kill itself? Naruto then thought of Hashirama Senju, the Shodai Hokage. The man was respected for his Mokuton abilities, which made him a god on the battlefield, unbeatable by all except Madara Uchiha, his friend and rival. Naruto, however, found that he respected the man's quest to bring peace to the lands that had long since been plunged into a warring state between clans. Now, while Naruto found that he respected the man for that, he found that he disagreed, with a surprising amount of loathing? Anger? Naruto wasn't sure what he felt, but he was surprisingly angry when he thought of the man's method. Capturing the bijou and spreading them across the villages? What would that accomplish? The man had done it because he thought it would bring about a power balance, shifting the scales of war so that it would be equal. But what confused Naruto wasn't a scale just as balanced if you removed everything on it? Why did the Shodai feel the need to place things onto the scale? Naruto suddenly glared at his right hand, which was lazily tapping on the wooden desk in front of him. Why did the man feel the need to enslave creatures that were not bothering him at all? Up until that point, the bijou had peacefully lived away from humanity. It was Madara Uchiha that had made the Kyuubi attack Hashirama, not the Kyuubi's own free will. Naruto was angered. A sentient being's freedom was not something that should ever have been sacrificed for a false imitation of peace. Naruto closed his eyes, bringing his right hand up to slowly rub the bridge of his nose, before he dropped it back down and opened his eyes and ears to the man in front of him. Team 7 Naruto, Natsumi Namikaze, and Sasuke Uchiha under Kushina Uzumaki. Iruka called out, prompting Naruto to search the room for his new teammates. Both, he was somewhat acquainted with. Natsumi Namikaze, heir to the Namikaze and Uzumaki conjoined clan, daughter of Minato Namikaze, the Yandame Hokage, and Kushina Uzumaki, their new sensei, no doubt picked because she wanted to teach her daughter. Naruto frowned once more at that thought. Whether it was unintentional or not, there was bound to be favoritism within the team. That would bring nothing good. Their sensei was bound to make biased decisions, favor Natsumi, and overall throw the team's potential askew. And then there was Sasuke Uchiha, second-born daughter of the Uchiha clan head Fugaku Uchiha, and his wife Mikoto Uchiha, sister of Itachi Uchiha, the greatest prodigy to have graced the Uchiha clan since Madara Uchiha. The girl had a nasty ego, and a need to prove herself. Naruto's frown deepened. The girl positively hated him. His first real encounter with her had been the spar, which ended with her boot on his back, and since then she had been avoiding him. Not only that, but she was an Uchiha, the clan head's daughter no less. The favoritism within the team would do nothing to her, as she would be taught once she got home as well, further segregating the team. Naruto gazed down at his hand, watching as the tendons stretched his skin as his fingers tapped the wooden desk. The only one who was really being hurt by this team's structure was him, and he wasn't entirely sure how to feel about it. Here he sat, with the Rookie of the Year and the Kunoichi of the Year as his teammates, with an S-class shinobi as his sensei, and he had felt cheated. He was placed in what could very well be the strongest genin team coming out of Konoha, at least, immediately out of the academy, and he wasn't satisfied with his placement. Naruto sighed, rolling his head back and staring at the ceiling. He wished that he had been placed in an all-civilian team with a simple jounin instructor. There would be no favoritism, none of the genin would have more training than the others, and the jounin would have no reason to make them take missions above D rank for quite some time. At that particular thought, Naruto furrowed his brow in thought. Why did the thought of a mission above D rank make him feel apprehensive? Before his parents' death, Naruto had been excited to leave the village and find himself fame, glory. Before his parents' death, he would have been positively ecstatic about his team's placement, especially his sensei being an S-ranked shinobi with their own fame. But ever since then, his thoughts had been scrambled, clashing with everything that he had believed for his entire, albeit short, 12-year-long life. He had been thinking much more lately, about everything. Before, he would have never thought about his team's future favoritism, about the idiocy of the human race's tendency to respect its ability to kill itself, about anything other than his future as a glorious shinobi. Where was their glory in war? In death? Many veteran shinobi found themselves thinking the same things, at least those that had seen true war. Naruto wondered if Minato Namikaze ever thought such things. Ever pondered the futility of war, how useless it was. Naruto was roused from his thoughts as the two seats to his right were suddenly occupied, Natsumi sitting to his immediate right, with Sasuke sitting to her right. Naruto cast his eyes over them, before sighing and returning his gaze to the ceiling. "Hello?" Natsumi called out softly, smiling over at him. Naruto looked at her from the corner of his eye, before looking at the ceiling, tracing the patterns within it with his ringed eyes. "Hello Natsumi, Sasuke." Naruto spoke, not looking at either of the girls, lost in his own world of thought. Sasuke looked over at him, before quickly looking away and looking at the door. Natsumi caught that, but didn't say anything, instead deciding to enjoy the serene silence that had captured her team. "Are you two satisfied with the placements?" Naruto's voice broke the silence randomly, prompting Natsumi to raise a delicate red brow, and Sasuke to look at the boy from the corner of her eye. "Yes, I am." Sasuke grunted out in a very Uchiha-like manner, keeping her ebony gaze trained on Naruto's form. "Yes, I am rather happy with the way things turned out. Why do you ask, Naruto?" Natsumi questioned, turning her head to look at the boy. Naruto met their gazes with his own, before sighing, bringing his left arm back from over the chair and fiddling with his thumbs. He looked down at them, and then turned his gaze to the two girls. "It's nothing, don't worry about it, alright?" Naruto told them with a soft smile on his face, causing a light dusting of red to appear on Sasuke's cheeks, and causing Natsumi's other brow to slowly raise, before both dropped when the door opened, Kushina strolling in with a brilliant smile on her face, her violet eyes instantly locking onto Natsumi's sapphire eyes. "Team 7 with me!" At her call, Naruto raised his head and looked at her. The woman was wearing the standard jounin outfit, though a black katana sheath was on her back, her red hair cascading down her back as well. Naruto's observations were cut short when his team rose to his right, prompting him to rise as well. Line break. Team 7 sat assembled on the roof of the academy, which Naruto quickly decided was a rather odd and inconvenient place to meet if it became a permanent one. He leaned on a railing while his team sat on the roof, Kushina standing before the trio with a proud smile on her face and her hands balled into fists pressing into her hips. Naruto stared at her smile, watching the way it creaked upwards with pride, her eyes shining with the same emotion whenever they passed over Natsumi. He would have frowned, but it wouldn't do anything, he decided. The favoritism that he knew would surface eventually was already showing. He sighed, rubbing his forehead slowly. He was disappointed with the Hokage's decision of his team. "Okay. Let's get some introducing out of the way. I'll start," Kushina exclaimed loudly, boisterously jabbing her thumb at herself when she finished, cracking one eye open as she smiled cheekily. Naruto did not react, though Natsumi smiled and Sasuke cracked a smirk. "The name's Kushina Uzumaki, though I'm sure you definitely knew that. My likes include Minato-kun, Natsumi-chan, and ramen. I definitely hate perverts, especially a certain one, and anybody that would try to bring this world out of its peaceful state." At her words, Naruto frowned. Where was there peace in this world? People still died to other people, died early. The fact that shinobi existed at all was anything but peaceful. What use would soldiers be in a truly peaceful world? My hobbies include training, and spending time with my family. My dreams, well, they've already come true. Who's next? Kushina finished with a pleasant smile that made Naruto angry. How was she happy when the world was filled with people that she was supposed to hate? Her daughter was someone that was bringing the world out of a peaceful state, even if the innocent Natsumi didn't mean to. Then Naruto frowned, disappointed. He himself was taking the next step to become a shinobi. This plunged Naruto into deep thinking. Why was he becoming a shinobi? He could have dropped out of the academy at any time, yet he had stayed. Why? It clashed with everything he had been thinking of lately, everything he was beginning to believe in. His frown deepened. Why was he even taking the next step? He knew he wanted to bring peace, but was becoming a shinobi the way to do that? And you? Kushina's voice broke Naruto out of his musings, prompting the boy to lazily raise his head and stare at his team. Huh! Oh, I'm next? Well, I suppose. My name is Naruto. I don't have a surname, so don't bother. My likes? I guess. I don't know, thinking? My dislikes. That's easy. I dislike hatred. War. Everything the human race has become so deeply seated into that it's hard for me to envision a world of peace. I don't really have any hobbies other than thinking. And my dream? I want to bring peace to this world. True peace, not this false imitation that it has set into. Naruto finished, his eyes shimmering with a fire that had not been alight within them for some time. His team had grown silent at his words, and Kushina looked as if she was conflicted on something, and she seemed to look at him with something akin to sadness. She looked like she was trying to say something, but she stopped. Shaking her head, the same smile found its way onto her face. Well then, now that that's out of the way, meet me at Training Ground 7. Suddenly, she exploded in a puff of smoke, revealing that she was a shadow clone the entire time. Line break. Kushina found herself feeling a little unnerved as Naruto's royal purple eyes piercingly gazed into her own violet irises. She had just started the bell test after giving her team a rundown of the rules and their goal, and after she had started the timer, she would be lying to you if she said she wasn't shocked to see Naruto just stand there, staring at her. You're not a smart one, are ya? Kushina mocked, trying to get a rouse out of the curious genin hopeful that didn't try and run, use whatever stealth he had, to make a plan. Instead, he frowned, crossed his arms, and just stood in front of her. On the contrary, Kushina-san, I believe I am the smart one in this situation. You are a jounin, on top of that you are an S-rank shinobi. No amount of attempted stealth on my part will allow me to actually hide from you. No amount of planning will allow me to formulate a plan to beat you. This test is no doubt a mere facade, set to make us complete a hidden goal or requirement. Perhaps it is to simply impress our tutors and make them see our potential as genin. And if that is the case, the best I can offer is to try and dismantle this false test and see it for what it really is. Naruto suddenly narrowed his eyes as he continued, his words succeeding in making Kushina uneasy. Actually, I'm beginning to believe that this test is merely being administered as a mere formality, just based on the placements. On one hand, we have an Uchiha clan head's daughter on this team, no doubt giving special training and a potential prodigy like her brother Itachi. And on the other hand, we have the daughter of you, an S-ranked clan head, but not only that, she is the daughter of the Yondaime Hokage. No doubt she has been trained by you too, so you being her sensei, you would already know of her prowess. As her parents, you wouldn't allow her to take these tests if she wasn't ready. Naruto's frown from before returned, slowly getting deeper and making darker trenches in his face as he continued. In reality, the only oddball in this team placement is me, but I suppose I placed low enough that I could have been given the dead-ass moniker, and in tradition I would be placed with the two highest students. No doubt Natsumi is one of them, and it's fairly easy to imagine Sasuke being the other. Naruto cracked a smirk, before suddenly plopping down with a loud, relaxed sigh on the ground, slowly easing into a lying position with his arms behind his head. It's not really a stretch to say we would pass this test even if we failed the main goal, is it, Kushina-san? And while yes, I do see this as a way for you to get a grasp on your students' skill levels, you are already intimately aware of Natsumi's, and Sasuke's is fairly obvious based on her clan. And well, to be truthful with you, there is nothing I offer to the table other than a decent henge, a slow kawarimi, and a pathetic bunshin. Oh, and my eyes have swirls in them now, Naruto remarked, before closing his eyes and sighing, attempting to sleep. Kushina stared at the only boy on her team, of which his gender was the least differing thing about him. He was the only one present with no surname, the only one present who no longer had parents, the only one present who had no formal shinobi training outside of the academy. Not to mention, he was also the only one who seemingly refused to even try to accomplish the task of the test. Another thing that unnerved Kushina was the boy's deliberate and accurate teardown and dissection of the team's placement, and the effects it would cause. And while Kushina would like to tell herself she would never be a sensei who would show, let alone house, any favoritism towards any one student, she ultimately knew that if it came to saving her daughter, or saving the other two genin on her team, she would choose her daughter and let the other two die. And that thought itself ruined Kushina's perspective on her ability to teach the team, of which she was utterly confident of beforehand. The blonde continued to lay on the grass, his arms nestled neatly underneath his head, and his left eye lazily cracked open to gaze at the sky. Naruto! Kushina began, prompting the boy to wrestle his one eye's attention away from the clouds and onto her own violet eyes. While I understand you aren't as far along in your training as the girls, Kushina decided those were the wrong words to use as soon as she saw the boy's chest fall quickly in a sigh, his eye roll back towards the sky, and his right hand untangle itself from underneath his head to pull a bang away from his closed eye, making the action pointless. But that's the whole point of being taught under a jounin sensei. So, won't you please get up and attempt the test, if not for your sensei, for your teammates? Kushina urged, wishing to break the mindset of worthlessness the boy had seemingly put himself into. It was rather clear that the boy seemed to think little of himself in the shinobi arts. The boy's jutsu surely couldn't be as bad as he thought they were. Naruto cracked his eye open to gaze at her, curious as to what purpose she was trying to fill with her words of encouragement. He would have sighed, if he was older. Clearly, the woman was trying to make the boy believe he would receive enough training to, at least, put him on par with the others on his team, which, Naruto would believe, had they refused to learn until he caught up, and then allowed him to be granted a 6-month lead. Naruto was no longer prideful of himself, and had come to see reason that he learned shinobi arts at a slightly below average pace, something which was blatantly obvious by the amounts of studying and practical practice he had to put into passing the genin exam, of which he passed barely. Come to think of it, Naruto wondered if the Hokage had specifically ordered his graduation out of pity. Or perhaps, he had ordered his graduation so he could place him on a team with his daughter and his good friend Figaka's daughter, allowing Kushina, their sensei, to specially train the two girls under the false pretense that Naruto was slower, and pass him off to a subpar jounin, potentially even chunin instructor. Naruto did sigh as he got up, feeling his knees pop slightly and his back to crack as he stretched, a tired groan escaping his lips. Naruto cursed his thought process, which has actually made him feel worthless. Probably because the options he had presented himself didn't seem too far out there, maybe with the exception that he would receive a chunin instructor within the next 6 months. Push it to 8, and he wasn't so sure. Uzumaki-sama. Naruto raised a brow in curiosity at the slight flinch he saw appear on Kushina's face at his even less formal title he called her by. I know what you are doing. Trying to encourage me to participate. Well, I suppose I can amuse you. With that, Naruto merely jogged into the woods, and plopped himself onto a branch of the tree closest to the clearing, allowing him to gaze at the woman, but which would actually provide him an opportunity to help either Natsumi or Sasuke when the pair no doubt made their move on the bells, either alone or together. While he waited, Naruto decided to ponder something. Where would he live now that the orphanage would no longer be legally required to house him? It wasn't as if his team could fail this test, making him a genin, and therefore a legal adult. With Natsumi. The Namikaze heir was saddened by Naruto's words to her mother, and attempted to persuade herself that he was wrong. However, she was hard-pressed to prove his words wrong. In her head she knew he was right, but her heart wanted him to be wrong. Surely, her mother of all people, would be fair with her team? Then, a thought broke Natsumi's others. Her mother trained her every day after dinner. That alone was favoritism. Her eyes got a little darker in sadness as she realized Sasuke also received said training, if the conversations between her mother and Sasuke's mother were to be believed. That brought another curious thought to Natsumi's mind: where did Naruto even live, if he had no parents? Shaking her head, Natsumi decided she might as well finish this depressing train of thought. And to do just that, Natsumi rushed into the clearing. With Sasuke. Sasuke did not hear Naruto's words, for she was too busy trying to find Natsumi. Surely if the girls paired up, they could get the bells. And, even though she had to smother down a frown at the thought of pushing Naruto to his failure, her pride as an Uchiha and the need to prove herself to her father helped her drown those thoughts. She ran around the ring of the forest, her eyes catching the sight of Naruto lazily swinging his leg from a tree by the clearing as she did so. When she came around to where she thought she had seen Natsumi dash into the forest, she found herself staring at the back of the girl's redhead. Before she could say anything, the Namikaze heir dashed into the clearing, prompting Sasuke to do the same. The two girls exploded out of the forest and into the clearing, Natsumi's hand flying into a cross sign with 15 shadow clones puffing into existence around her and Kushina, which prompted her mother to grip her katana by its sheath and proceed to cut down all of the clones with speed and strength. Sasuke grabbed the real Natsumi's shoulder and pulled her back slightly while the clones distracted Kushina. Listen, I think you and me need to work together to get those bells, Sasuke began, staring into Natsumi's eyes intently. The Namikaze nodded her head, briefly thinking about Naruto, and almost went to talk to Sasuke about their third teammate, before her mother came flying out of a massive smoke cloud just as memories of a painful, blunt trauma death fluttered her mind. Duck! Sasuke yelled, grabbing Natsumi and dropping the pair to the ground as Kushina's foot flew past them. However, the woman remained planted in front of them. Natsumi looked up to see her mother with her sword raised threateningly, only for a shroud of heat and light coursed quickly over her mother's visage with Sasuke's body flying forward, fire spewing out of her mouth like a hose. Kushina growled out, swinging her sword quickly, water chakra spewing out of her mouth, and her sword forced it at the fire, negating it before it could burn her. Sasuke panted slightly while standing in front of Natsumi protectively. Natsumi's eyes widened, before she jumped up to Sasuke's side with her hands once more forming the cross seal, two clones popping into existence beside her. Sasuke, got another fireball in ya? One clone signed to her with its back turned to Kushina, while the real Natsumi and the other clone kept Kushina busy with taijutsu incorporating kawarimi and more kage bunshin to allow the real Natsumi to remain in good physical condition. Sasuke nodded in confirmation, while the clone began to sign the plan to her. Nodding with a smirk, Sasuke jumped into the fray, Natsumi smirking and forming two more clones behind her, with the one from before joining her. Kushina smirked as well. Backing off I see. Admirable, in this situation. Kushina cockily stated, swinging her sheathed katana in her hand. Natsumi glared at her mother. Quickly, her and her three clones began to flash through hand signs. Futon de Tapa! Natsumi and her clones shouted, while Sasuke jumped up behind them and released a massive fireball, larger than the one she had sent before. Kushina's eyes widened as the flames overtook her entire form. Quickly, she performed a kawarimi, even as the fire continued and burned the forestry behind them, prompting another pop of smoke to appear, though dangerously closer to the fire than Kushina's had been. Appearing right where Kushina had been was Naruto, who had substituted with a larger stick that had been blown off a tree by the scuffle between Kushina and Natsumi's clones. Naruto looked around, acting surprised that he had ended up where he was, despite being the one who had to perform the substitution. Looking down, Naruto crouched and scooped up two small, metal balls in his hand that made little chime noises as he stood up, the two bells clanking together noisily, making everyone present raise their eyes. Kushina, because she did not believe the bells had fallen off of her waist. Sasuke, because she now worried about not graduating, as Naruto would surely choose Natsumi over her, who had been mean to him and bullied him. Natsumi worried because she did not realize that her and Sasuke's jutsu had been aimed at where Naruto. Looking at them, and even jiggling his arm a little bit to make them chime, Naruto stared with an O shape forming his mouth. I guess Naruto merely stared at the twin bells in his hand. Kushina pushed past Sasuke and Natsumi, staring at Naruto. How did you get those, Naruto? Kushina questioned. Naruto looked at her, and went to answer, before Natsumi stepped forward. Me and Sasuke executed that conjoined jutsu to mask my third clone's kunai, and its speed was enhanced by the two wind jutsus I used, which propelled it forward, cutting the string on the bells before you had time to kawarimi away. However, we did not know Naruto was in the tree behind you, and he substituted with a large branch that had fallen on top of the bells after the fight between you and clones. I don't know how the wind jutsu didn't affect it though. Natsumi looked at the ground and thought at this. Kushina nodded, before staring at Naruto. Well then, Naruto, who will pass with you, and who will no longer be eligible for the shinobi job? Kushina questioned, staring at Naruto. The team passing relied on Naruto, though, unfortunately she knew, no matter what he said, the team would pass. Naruto looked at the bells in his hand, then back to his team. Naruto personally believed that even asking the question was pointless, and from the look on Kushina's face, she believed so as well. Sasuke looked utterly devastated. Perhaps she thought he would choose Natsumi over her, had the rules set by Kushina actually been true? He supposed that made sense, given her need as the Uchiha clan head's daughter to be worthy. And Natsumi on the other hand seemed to some extent, know that no matter what, she was passing this test. Whether that was because she knew the team was bound to pass, or she believed her father would just make her a genin if Naruto chose Sasuke, Naruto did not know, or bother to figure out. With a slight huff, and an exaggerated swing of his arm, Naruto tossed the bells to the two girls on his team. They can pass. I'll find something to do, so don't you worry about me being bored. Ja-ne. Naruto stuffed his hands in his pockets, and with a mock two-fingered salute, turned around and began to lazily walk away, leaving the rest of Team 7 shocked. Kushina was even too shocked to say anything, watching the boy leave before telling him that he had actually passed. Naruto, however, merely walked onward, eyes gazing at the clouds as he walked back into the village. Maybe he'd get a job as a waiter or something in one of the many Akimichi-owned restaurants. Or perhaps he'd get a nice, elderly caretaking job? Probably not, as he needed food, and he needed it soon. The Akimichi restaurants seemed better suited for him, considering employees received free meals. Naruto smiled carelessly as he walked onward, and even hummed a little tune as he walked. Naruto passed a certain jounin who was leaning up against the side of a bookstore, a new, limited edition orange book in his right hand, with his uncovered eye scanning the pages. Before catching sight of the blonde hair which made him believe his sensei had come to see him, prompting him to drop his book and stare, only to look on in disappointment as he saw the little orphan with the weird eyes. Actually, this sight intrigued Kakashi, the jounin who was reading his newest book. If he remembered correctly, and he knew he did, it was tradition for passing teams to either immediately train together, or to have lunch with each other while the sensei went to report that they had passed to the Hokage. This intrigued Kakashi for the mere fact that, by this little brat's mere presence, alone, in the village, it implied that Natsumi's team had failed. Raising a brow in curiosity, Kakashi strode forward, eyes still glued to his book, and eventually fell into stride with the blonde boy. Naruto noticed Kakashi's presence, but didn't react to it at all, merely walking with his hands in his pockets, observing the businesses and market stalls they passed on their tranquil walk. The blonde knew the man wanted something from him, considering he had gotten up as soon as Naruto passed him, but didn't know quite what it was. He decided that if it was important, the man would have asked by now, so he left it alone and continued to walk, even humming a little tune as he did so. Eventually, Kakashi sighed, stuffing his book in his back pocket and pressing his hand to his brow ridge. Do the youngsters of today not care if some random shinobi, not to mention stranger, walks up behind them and then follows them? Kakashi questioned the blonde, who stopped and looked into the man's one eye with his swirled eyes, which Kakashi found intriguing as well, and personally believed they were a dojutsu, though which one they were he did not know, which caused him to pass it off as weak, seeing as he, nor anyone else, knew what they were, or even what they did. It seemed, even the boy himself didn't know, and had just believed his eyes had changed for no reason. Well, Jounin-san, I happen to know that you are a Konoha shinobi, of rather high rank and reputation, given that on multiple occasions I have seen you frequent the Namikaze household, and even have gone to dinner with Yandame-sama's family. So unless you are going to tell me that I'm suddenly going to be assaulted, I don't believe your presence is of any concern for my well-being. Naruto explained casually, causing Kakashi to sigh in exasperation. Well, I guess my reputation precedes me. Kakashi replied rather cockily, even tilting his head rapidly as if his head had to adjust to the ego boost he had just experienced, until Naruto chuckled and turned around, returning to his walk. Actually, Jounin-san, the Hokage's reputation precedes even you, who is not said Hokage. Naruto's cheeky reply caused Kakashi to deflate and cry a river of tears, before he jogged to catch up with the boy after rapidly wiping his one visible eye. Now, in all seriousness, Jounin-san, I do believe you wanted something from me, no? Naruto glanced up at the silver-haired man to his right, and began to ponder on exactly what it was he wanted. Perhaps Naruto had over-exaggerated the time it would take to assign Naruto a separate teacher out of pity. Surely Kushina, or someone had noticed how pathetically long it took Naruto to even Kawarimi. He gazed up at the man, who seemingly had one eye, considering he concealed the other. Perhaps this man no longer had a use in the field, and was being delegated Naruto as a student, out of equal pity from the Hokage. If that were the case, Naruto decided he would quit being a shinobi, to preserve both of their dignities. Kakashi nodded at Naruto's words, scratching the top of his head lightly. Well, I was wondering if your team passed the Genin test? Kakashi questioned, staring with his cycloptic eye at Naruto's dual swirls. Said blonde stared up at the Jounin, before smirking lightly, almost unnoticeable. Well, Jounin-san, I do believe we would have all passed to be a team in the first place. Though, I must confess I had a rather hard time passing the Bunshin portion, and I am glad that Iruka-sensei took pity on my current situation and passed me. Though, to be truthful, I almost wonder if it would have worked out better for me if he hadn't. Naruto admitted truthfully, thinking on his need to find a stable job so he could at least eat every day now. Kakashi further sighed at his words, once more flailing his arms in annoyance. Gah, you know what I mean! The real Genin test, the one administered by your Jounin sensei. Kakashi muttered in exasperation, glaring with an annoyed gleam at the blonde who once more strode forward with no stop. A light bulb seemingly appeared over Naruto's head. It. Well, to be honest with you, I don't think that question is really warranted by you, or anyone for that matter. I mean, let's be real here, Jounin-san, would the Hokage allow his daughter, or the daughter of one of his closest friends, the Uchiha clan head, to fail the test and have to retake the final year of the academy? Not even that. Would the mother of one of her genins allow the team to fail? Naruto chuckled as he walked away from a far-eyed Kakashi. Come on, Jounin-san, look underneath, right? With that, Naruto disappeared into the crowd of Konoha citizens, a bewildered Kakashi left in his wake. It had been a short 2 weeks since Naruto and the rest of Team 7 had passed Kushina's genin test, with only Sasuke and Natsumi seeming to gain positive emotions out of the ordeal, while Naruto merely shrugged his shoulders with the corners of his mouth pulled inwards slightly. Naruto's living arrangement was not really an arrangement at all, really. He had taken to life on the streets rather well, actually. With not a single clue as to what he would do, he returned to the orphanage, initially hoping to be allowed to stay until he had a stable life and actual shelter, most likely in the form of an apartment. However, he was disappointed as, upon arrival and after explaining his situation, the orphanage workers sadly shook their head and said they could not allow him to do that. However, they did allow him to keep the blanket and pillow he had used before, as well as offering him the ability to return weekly to wash his laundry. Naruto smiled happily at the lady who offered this to him and shook her hand with a hearty grip. Though, as he exited with a large comforter and pillow in hand, he then realized he had nowhere to actually put the items, let alone sleep in/on, which a word was right. So, Naruto wandered around town, with many raising a brow or two at what was in his hands, but not saying anything. Naruto suspected they knew what his situation was by the look of his slightly ragged clothing, a simple black shirt with gray shorts and shinobi sandals, and the bundle of bedding he was carrying. Naruto also suspected that they were purposefully avoiding helping him, though he was keen to point out to himself that it was almost a tradition to pass by the homeless, as few as they were, that riddled Konoha's markets. Which, at the thought, a light bulb went off in his head, making the blonde smile softly and nod his head. There had to be a reason the homeless gathered primarily around the market section of Konoha's layout, and he assumed it had to do with the businesses there. Open stalls, with fresh food hanging out in the open. He wasn't saying they were stealing, though he wasn't going to say that a tomato or two falling off a stand hurt anybody. Thankfully, 2 days later Naruto was able to find employment in an Akimichi barbecue restaurant as a waiter, a job which Naruto found that he enjoyed. Whether it was simply taking a compliment, or even the thank you he received on a daily basis, Naruto was pleased. Not to mention his ability to balance multiple things on his arms or in his hands increased marginally. And since the restaurant was shinobi-owned, Naruto wasn't forced to choose between his shinobi career and his job there, with his managers basically just filling in time for employees whenever available. Members of the Akimichi clan made up a large portion of the workforce, and with the numerous missions they go on, the restaurants they worked in had to be able to accommodate, which was why numerous civilians had worked in the Akimichi chains as well. Initially, Naruto wasn't going to be able to get a job, since he was a shinobi and they expected that the cash flow would be enough for him. However, after explaining his situation, not to mention Kushina had dropped a metaphorical bomb on him when she explained that she wouldn't start even D-rank missions until 2 months of training, the Akimichi who hired him wiped a tear and shook his hand, a firm grip and a toothy grin welcoming Naruto to the Akimichi workforce. With an above minimum wage salary with tips given to him as well. I'm not even going to bother mentioning money amounts, even when Naruto is purchasing or selling something at any point, because personally as both a reader and a writer, I feel that a foreign currency doesn't really hold any meaning in a story that's roots or home country don't use said currency. So, within the 2 weeks he had worked, Naruto had managed to get enough money to eat for about a month and 1/2 if he paced his purchases and rationed food, though his main way to eat right now was the meal the Akimichis gave him before each shift he worked, which was a 4 to 10 p.m. shift every day. With his daily training sessions being 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. every day, Naruto found that he settled into routine fairly easily and comfortably. During his work shifts, Naruto had met a wide array of people, one of which he saw nearly every day. Dressed in a long tan overcoat which covered a fishnet shirt and an orange skirt, with spiky purple hair, the bangs of which were held up by a Konoha headband, was Anko Mitarashi, Dango lover and snake summoner. Naruto had learned quickly that, while the barbecue stand hosted by the Akimichi wasn't explicitly meant a dango stand as Anko always referred to it as, the woman frequented it almost daily simply to get an order of dango, and to speak to the manager Akimichi woman who worked there every day without fail, no longer wanting to live the shinobi life. Through watching the other customers' eyes narrow, or widen, at her entrance to the restaurant, as well as listening to the whispered mutterings as he neared them with a plastic smile and a plate full of food held on his left shoulder, Naruto learned that she was somewhat of a pariah due to her connection with the traitorous snake Sannin. Orochimaru. She had been his apprentice, was Naruto's inferred hypothesis. Naruto passed off this hypothesis and decided not to act on it, or the whispers he heard about her as he worked his shifts, preferring to stay out of others' business and instead focus on making enough money to eat. Eventually, however, Anko did not come for 3 days, which had affected his manager, if her constant checking of the front door for something was to be taken into account. After the 3rd day, however, Anko did stroll in, rather slowly and with an odd gait, before slumping into a bar stool and leaning her head down onto her arms. Unfortunately for Anko, it seemed, the manager had not arrived to work that day, and Naruto believed it was for her sister's baby delivery, based on the excited rambling from his Akimichi co-workers. Seeing the purple-haired woman slumped forward on the bar stool, without ordering her daily dango, almost worried the young blonde genin. Whilst cleaning the bar with a white rag, Naruto happened to pass by the woman, rag in hand, going round and round in circles by her. The pupilless eyes followed his movements, before suddenly dashing up to meet his eyes. Naruto could see it within them, swirling dangerously. She was scared. Fearful. Saddened. Naruto wondered if it was a stretch to say that she was depressed. Deciding it was because the manager wasn't here for Anko to talk to, considering the woman seemed to have waited, was it half an hour now, Naruto decided to talk to her. "You'll have to excuse me, miss, but I'd like to inform you that the manager Chocho isn't here today. I believe her sister is delivering her baby as we speak," Naruto informed her, meeting her eyes while he spoke, before dropping them back to the rag and continuing cleaning the bar. After a few seconds, Anko leaned forward quickly and grabbed his sleeve. Naruto turned to look at her, though she seemed skittish almost. Naruto thought that was odd, considering her rather brazen attitude, not to mention attire. "Yes, miss?" Naruto questioned, looking at her. "See, can I?" She looked down, pondering something, before Naruto saw her shake her head and then raise her eyes to him, a determined almost light in her eyes. "Can I have an order of sake?" Anko questioned the boy. Looking at her, Naruto ignored her and looked back at his rag as Anko's arm dropped, folding it up neatly and placing it behind him, right where the sake was placed, before taking 2 steps towards Anko, interlocking his fingers together, and leaning onto the bar with his elbows, staring into her eyes. Anko found that the troubles of her life seemed to fade away, swirling down into the pupil of his eye, encouraged by the swirls within his sclera. "Anko-san." Anko perked up at this, having lost her thoughts within the depths of his violet eyes. "I don't believe it would be a good idea for you to drink right now," Naruto explained, staring into her eyes, noting the disheveled and rugged look of her hair that he had missed before. She then narrowed her eyes and furrowed her brows angrily. "What? It doesn't matter what you think, I'm a paying customer, and you will bring out a suite of sake for me to drown down." Anko growled at him, gritting her teeth and flashing them, a spark of chakra erupting around her body in anger. The chakra spike had irritated the curse mark on the back of her shoulder, causing her to sharply intake some air and hastily grip her shoulder, rubbing it. Naruto caught this action, but didn't react to it, simply pouring a glass of sake, and returning to standing in front of Anko, swirling the glass in his hand. "Anko-san." His calling of her name caused the woman to remove her hand from her shoulder and look at him, her eyes glancing down at the shot in his hand. "Thank you." Naruto pulled the glass back from her nabbing hand and took a sip for himself, sighing after he drank it. Anko growled at this. Leaning forward angrily, she snarled at him. Listen, kid, I get it that you might not like me because of my teaching under Orochimaru, but I'm rather good friends with Chocho, and if you don't dash, I am aware of both your friendship with Chocho and your apprenticeship under Orochimaru, and frankly, Anko-san, I care about neither of them. His words, while sounding rude, shocked Anko, and she listened to him, leaning back slowly and sitting down with widened, if suspicious, eyes. Then, why won't you give me my drink? Anko asked, still a little angry that she wasn't getting what she wanted. Swirling the drink, Naruto's own swirls watching the liquid, he then replied. Well, it's rather simple, really. I can tell you're sad. Depressed even. It's your eyes that are telling me this, as well as your posture and actions. You didn't burst into her brazenly calling out to Chocho-san, your chest waving everywhere as you deliberately allowed the overcoat you wear to fall a little past your shoulders, allowing them more exposure for people to look at while you pretend to care, nor did you immediately order dango. You also slumped forward on the bar and even held back tears in the slight wetness to your eyes as anything to go by. Really, all I'm leading to is... With a flourish, Naruto drank the rest of the drink and slammed it down behind him, shaking his head before leaning forward and staring into Anko's surprised eyes. Drinking won't help you solve whatever issues you're having, Anko-san, and while you might think they will now, I think we both know they won't. And without Chocho here to listen to and comfort you, I think I can take the reins this once and help out a fellow shinobi with her struggles, don't you think? Naruto watched as his words sunk in, watching the way Anko's face randomly constricted and her skin was pulled, before her eyes narrowed in obvious suspicion. Oh yeah? And what struggles would you happen to be going through, Squirt? Girl troubles? Sensei not letting you take a C-rank mission? Parents not buying you that kunai set you want? Anko mocked, her words doing nothing to falter Naruto's gaze before the blonde sighed, untangling his hands and draping one down the left side of his face, Anko noting that the violet swirls in his eye extended past the point where one couldn't see the eye anymore, stretching behind his eye. Well, Anko-san, none of those are true. To begin, my parents were murdered. At his words, Anko's eyes widened and she went to apologize, though Naruto continued. And I almost was too. Some crazed maniac had just wandered in, waving a knife everywhere while my parents and one of their friends backed away in horror. I was asleep at the time. I woke up to screams. When I came out, 3 bodies littered the floor of my house, and I passed out in shock. When I came to, I could only see the moon, through a window. The murdered had propped me up, my head leaned back and the knife dripping blood onto my forehead. Real freaky dude, I tell ya. Naruto sighed, rubbing his forehead and appearing far older than he was. I had forgotten even who I was, or what I was doing. All I remember is that I saw the moon. It almost seemed comforting. Like I had known the moon. Shaking his head and chuckling, Naruto looked back up at Anko. Anyway, before I knew it, I was in a crater. I don't know how it happened, but the Hokage seems to think it's related to these swirls I've got in my eyes now. Naruto lazily pointed a finger at his eyes. Though, the guy he was supposed to call to come look at my eyes hasn't arrived within a whole year, so well, I don't think that's happening any time soon. Regardless, I found myself orphaned with no home to return to within a single night. Not to mention, I don't have my dazzlingly gorgeous blue eyes anymore. Instead, I've got these creepy purple eyes that make me look crazy all the time since they've got rings in them. Naruto's exaggerated words made Anko chuckle slightly, her hand daintily raising to cover her mouth as she giggled. And well, a year later I graduated the academy and got placed with the Hokage's daughter and the Uchiha clan head daughter. And you know what? Naruto looked at Anko, wondering if he should be telling some random woman potentially twice his age his problems, before shaking his head with a grin and dropping it. I was disappointed with the Hokage's team placements. Could you imagine that? Disappointed with the 2 strongest genin and an S-rank kunoichi, the Hokage's wife and Uzumaki clan head, not to mention, as a sensei. But I suppose it was because I felt that I didn't fit with them. It wasn't because I wasn't good enough. But I just knew, that I wouldn't be taught properly. The signs of favoritism don't even have to be looked for. I mean, my sensei is the fucking mother of my teammate. And I know damn well that the Uchiha clan head won't just let his daughter get trained by some jounin, even if she is S-ranked. So boom, my two teammates are getting extra training even though they were both already leagues ahead of me in the shinobi arts. Naruto chuckled, slumping down onto the bar and looking down. After a long 2 minutes of silence, Naruto looked back up. Wanna know something, Anko? The woman nodded softly, staring. Was that attempted comfort he saw in her eyes? At him. It's pretty strange to see a fresh genin working a civilian job, no? Naruto watched as Anko pondered it, tapping her chin. Actually, yeah, it does seem kinda weird. Why are you working? Anko questioned, staring at him curiously, awaiting an answer. Naruto smirked. Why he was a mystery to him, considering he shouldn't be smirking for having more issues. Well, as you know, once you've got that headband. Naruto nodded his head, indicating the Konoha headband around Anko's head. You're a legal adult. But what you probably don't know is that legal adults can't be housed within orphanages anymore. And I can't work at my age unless I've got a headband like that. Which means I was double fucked, because I couldn't work to save up money to buy a place or even food before I was kicked out of the orphanage. Naruto watched as tears nearly came to Anko's eyes, and the woman attempted to lean forward to hug him, but Naruto placed his hand on her collarbone, softly pushing her away. Seeing her questioning look, Naruto smiled softly at her, shaking his head. You don't have to try and comfort me, Anko. I just told you my problems so that you wouldn't feel like it's only happening to you. I know, at least for me. Naruto turned around and leaned his elbows on the bar, no longer looking at Anko. Knowing someone else also has it rough helps me. Anko smiled, and heard the little squeak the bar stool made as she stood up, as well as the loud footsteps she took out, indicating that she had her brazen attitude back. Though, Anko didn't see Naruto casually wipe away a bit of dirt under his eye and look at the little moistness that had followed his finger, almost as if it didn't belong there. Naruto hummed lowly to himself as he sat with his legs curled, his knees pressing into the dirt in front of a white fence, his hands hidden within yellow gloves plastered with little specks of dirt that littered the surface, falling off and being added to as his hands dug into the earthy soil beneath him. Gripping onto small tangles of roots and pulling them out, careful to not disturb the larger, wanted roots nestled around them. Yes, Naruto was pulling weeds. What are you doing? A feminine voice snarled to his far right. Naruto continued pulling the weeds beneath him, still happily humming away. Don't yell at me! What are you doing? Another feminine voice yelled to his right, causing Naruto to close his eyes and sigh, his hum stopping completely. Yes, Team 7 was completing their 4th D-ranked mission, significantly behind teams such as Team 8, who had completed 22 D-ranks, and Team 10 with 23. Naruto, of course, did not mind, knowing that the 2-month period Kushina had taken to exclusively training her team was the reason for this difference in mission counts. However, what Naruto did care about was the pay. So far, with only 4 missions, he had made about 1.5x more than he would have in 4 days of working at the restaurant. Putting those two values together nearly tripled his income. Naruto speculated that, within a month he would be able to afford a down payment on an apartment, and 6 months' rent paid in advance. This thought made Naruto smile happily. No longer would he leave work to find himself sitting in an alley a block away. However, he also wouldn't be able to hear the stories of the homeless, both shinobi and civilian, and no longer would he be able to see them smile when he would bring them portions of dinners he was given from Chocho for them to eat. Naruto grunted as a piece of dirt managed to hit his right shoulder, prompting the boy to lazily cast his head over towards the pair of girls that were viciously forcing their fingers into the dirt and forcefully pulling the roots out. Naruto sighed and shook his head, looking down to watch his own, slower and more careful movements, which eliminated any possibility that the plants being weeded would be affected by said action. Regardless, Naruto wasn't the one paying for such reckless actions, and decided to not open his mouth. A frail old lady nodded happily an hour later, observing how the weeds surrounding her beautiful roses had been pulled properly, doting on Naruto about his extremely neat and near perfectly pulled weeds. Naruto laughed heartily, rubbing the back of his head while the woman expressed how exquisite his actions were, deciding to pay him extra for his good work, causing Sasuke and Natsumi to groan quietly. Their soil had been hastily packed in and roughly thrown back where it was, whereas Naruto's looked no different than it did when they arrived. Well, thank you so much for pulling these weeds for me, youngsters. I just can't get down low enough these days, haha. The woman said as she turned around, entering her house once more, bidding the team goodbye. Alright, good job, Team 7. Mission, pulling weeds, is complete. Kushina shouted happily, causing Naruto to clap lightly while the other two girls merely deadpanned at Kushina. Sweat dropping at her team's attitude, she then turned around and began leading them back to the Hokage Tower. Naruto smiled serenely as he and his casually walked throughout Konoha, observing the civilians as they passed, all of whom smiled happily to Kushina and his teammates. Meanwhile, Natsumi and Sasuke conversed about things that Naruto could only ponder about, considering they almost never included him in their conversations. As they walked, Naruto noticed a similar face, Gijin Akimichi, a fellow co-worker. "Ah, Naruto! How's it going, buddy?" Gijin announced loudly as he exited a donut shop that Team 7 had passed, prompting Naruto's team to turn around to face the Akimichi. "Ah, hello, Gijin-kun. My day is going well. Me and my team are heading to the Hokage's office to finish a mission. How is it going for you today?" Naruto questioned politely, soft-voiced and soft-eyed. Gijin smiled with his eyes closed, the corners of his mouth reaching the corners of his eyes while he held a glazed donut in his left hand. "Ah, everything's going great for me, Naruto. When do you work on Saturday?" Gijin questioned, staring at Naruto curiously. Naruto sighed in an exasperated manner. "Chocho has me working an extra 2 hours, so I'll get off at midnight," Naruto explained, staring up at the older, not to mention whiter male, with an exasperated expression, his right arm coming up to drag along his face. Gijin laughed heartily, taking a large bite out of his donut and throwing his arm onto Naruto's shoulder. "Ah, don't worry, Naruto. Chocho's probably gonna pay you time and a half. We all sympathize with your situation. How long do you think it'll be before you can be stable now that you're taking D ranks with your team?" Gijin questioned with genuine concern in his eyes that Naruto found he liked seeing. "Oh, around a month, I think. If Chocho keeps giving me extra hours, I might be able to do it in around 2 weeks or so," Naruto replied proudly, his chest puffing up slightly. Gijin's smile returned, perhaps even wider, before he pat Naruto's back and finished his donut. "That's incredible, Naruto. We'll be sure to have a celebration at your new dig, yeah?" Gijin replied, patting Naruto's back once more after the blonde nodded, before waving and walking away. Shaking his head with a smile, Naruto turned around to face the curious faces of his team. Ignoring them, deciding that if they had a question they would ask, Naruto looked to Kushina. "You didn't have to wait for me, sensei, just a conversation with a coworker, you know." Naruto waved her off, seeing as he had held up the team. Kushina nodded her head, before Sasuke narrowed her eyes at Naruto. "Wouldn't we be your co-workers, Naruto?" Sasuke interrogated him, a dangerous gleam in her eyes for reasons Naruto decided he wouldn't question. Looking at her, Naruto shook his head. "Well, I guess you would, but I've been working at the Akimichi barbecue bar since we became a team." "Not everybody's got a house to go home to after training ends, Sasuke-san," Naruto chided, almost as if he was the girl's mother. This caused Kushina's eyes to widen. "Wait, Naruto-kun, do you not have a home?" After seeing the boy shake his head, her eyes widened once more. "Won't the orphanage let you stay there? You're not even 15!" Kushina exclaimed, now deeply bothered by her student's situation. Naruto smirked and furrowed his brows. "No, of course not, sensei. The orphanage can only help minors, and as soon as he passed your test, we became adults. I walked away from the Bell test a homeless guy, and still am. Thankfully I got a job at the barbecue bar, otherwise I don't know how I'd be able to eat," Naruto said with a smile that Natsumi decided shouldn't be on his face as he spoke of such things. Kushina's face exploded into worry. "Well, Naruto, you can stay with us. I'm sure Minato wouldn't mind, and you wouldn't either, right, Natsumi?" Kushina questioned her daughter with a glare and tone that said, "Your only answer is yes." Natsumi nodded quickly, with sincerity in her eyes. "Of course. I'd be happy to help you, Naruto," Natsumi exclaimed happily. Sasuke stepped forward, staring at Naruto. My family can help you too, Naruto, Sasuke offered coolly, though they all looked at Naruto as he smiled and shook his head. No. I can't bear to be a burden. Besides, I'll be able to afford an apartment in about a month, as you've heard me tell Gijin-kun. If I needed the help, I would have asked, don't worry. I appreciate that all of you would be willing to help me, but I was raised with a mentality of self-reliance. His words had been a lie. His parents had never raised him with something, quite the opposite in fact. They had set examples of receiving gifts and then thanking the other with something of equal value. However, Naruto had no longer wanted to feel like a burden, as he had already began to feel, as Kushina had to take time away from advancing Natsumi and Sasuke's teaching to ensure that Naruto understood the concepts well enough. To be truthful, Naruto decided that, while he liked the people on his team, he hated being on their team at the same time. He had underestimated just how much faster the two girls were at picking things up than he was. Kushina had attempted to teach the pair water walking, simply assuming Sasuke knew tree walking since Natsumi knew, and expecting Naruto to know as well. When she mentioned that the technique was very similar to the tree walking exercise, Naruto stayed silent, preferring to not hinder the girl's ability to learn the shinobi arts by forcing Kushina to get him caught up to speed. Whereas the girls were able to stay on the water for around 15 to 30 seconds their first attempt, Naruto waded into the water and didn't even stick to the water's surface. Whereas the girls were able to master the technique within a week, Naruto still could not stick to the water's surface within that same week. Naruto pretended not to care about his inability as a shinobi, nor did he show how much it had hurt him that Sasuke groaned and complained to Natsumi that they had to wait, Natsumi voicing her agreement, stating that others are slower than us, Sasuke-chan. Their words stung, though Naruto took the pain with a serene smile on his face and calm eyes, even when his sensei of all people seemed frustrated with his progress, eventually giving in and taking the girls to a separate clearing to teach them more advanced techniques that Naruto clearly wasn't ready for. When Naruto had watched their backs fade into the forest, he sighed, sitting down and slumping forward, his elbows on his thighs and his hands balled into fists that held up his head, pressing into his jaw while he closed his eyes and listened to the soft waves of the river. He did not notice that he had been sitting on the water as he did this. Line break. Nagato, no longer pain in his slumber, stared at the man that sat across from him, the only similarity between the pair being the rings within their eyes. Nagato brought his left knee up, his foot resting on the eternal black floor that made up what was apparently his mind, and rested his left arm on it, leaning back slightly. The man across mirrored his posture, and looked down between his legs. Nagato had come to treasure the little talks he had with the man across from him every time he slept. While he did not know it, his outlook and mentality was slowly shifting due to the man's presence within his mental space. The man, he had come to know as both Naruto and Hagoromo, as he had been told his names was, raised his head, the odd combination of spiky blonde and tan hair falling slightly as he did so, the wrinkles of his face sagging as well. "Hello, Nagato," the man greeted with a slight smile. "Likewise. What should I call you today?" Nagato began as he always did. The man brought a hand up to rub his chin, before looking at Nagato. "Hagoromo. Sai, it seems he has not been transitioning well." Now named Hagoromo answered Nagato, looking down sadly. Nagato nodded his head. The man had been referring to his so-called transmigrant, whose life had apparently been flipped completely upside down when Hagoromo began to merge, fuse, take over? Whatever the proper term was, with him. Not only had he lost his parents, something that Nagato could sympathize with, but he had also been questioning everything he did or noticed, something Nagato could not sympathize with. Unfortunately, it seemed that the boy, despite supposedly holding the Rinnegan, a fact that made Nagato believe that Hagoromo/Naruto was a figment of his imagination since he had heard of no other Rinnegan holders, was struggling to learn the shinobi arts due to his currently conflicted mindset. What confused Hagoromo was that the boy would pick up the shinobi arts when he unconsciously performed them, but until that point if he tried to learn them he failed to do so, making Hagoromo believe that the mental barrier that was capping the boy's potential was rather potent. Hagoromo often questioned Nagato, wondering if he should make himself known to the boy and hopefully straighten quite a few things out, but Nagato also told him it was his decision, which always stalled the man's thoughts on presenting himself to, well, himself in a sense. The two, despite being the same person, had two drastically different backgrounds and stories to tell, and despite sharing similar mindsets, Hagoromo questioned whether or not his will was simply overcoming the weaker, less developed will of Naruto, forcing the boy to begin adapting his mentality and belief. However, Hagoromo also expressed that he believed that the clash between wills had also been causing the boy's mentality to churn and twist, making it different than Hagoromo's. Perhaps it was age, the man had grunted out once after a sigh. Has his situation gotten any better? Nagato questioned, referring to the boy's current homelessness and day-to-day livelihood. Shaking his head in a negative, Hagoromo elaborated. He still has no home to return to, though he believes he will have enough money to within a month or so. Despite being offered help by multiple people, including his team and an entire clan, he refuses the help, lying to them about an upbringing that he didn't experience. The boy thinks of himself as a burden, and has even begun to lie to his sensei about understanding concepts just so that his teammates can move on and learn new things. The boy is selfless, to an almost dangerous extent. You know. The man chuckled slightly. He even pondered on whether or not getting a home for himself was a good idea, knowing he would miss the stories that the homeless tell him before he sleeps, or that he would make them feel inadequate. The boy has trouble feeding himself, and he still worries about others more than himself. Hagoromo stated with an exasperated grin. Nagato nodded his head. Despite the boy's troubles, he seemed to be growing into quite the admirable man. Has anyone discovered the eyes he holds? Nagato had been meaning to ask the question for a while, feeling a need to know whether or not Hagoromo, or the boy he spoke of, were real. It had been troubling him for quite a long time. Looking up, Hagoromo's swirls swinging in sync with Nagato's own, the older man shook his head and looked down with a downcast shadow forming on his face. No. The boy himself believes his eyes are merely a reminder of his parents' own death, believing that his world had been skewed to the point that even his eyes are twisted. The boy is miserable and he doesn't even know it. Hagoromo replied, making Nagato nod his head, before Hagoromo said something that caused Nagato's eyes to widen slightly. God, the Hokage said he'd call in an expert to check the eyes, but he hasn't arrived in Konoha in over a year and the boy believes that the Hokage has completely forgotten about him. The boy, in general, doesn't seem to care about himself, which is admirable to a degree. Hagoromo stated offhandedly. Meanwhile, Nagato began to wonder if there was more to his dreams than he had first believed. Chapter end.